The first thing my mother said after the champagne glass shattered across the marble floor was, "Please don't embarrass this family tonight." Not hello. Not happy birthday. Just that. 200 guests turned toward the noise inside the Hawthorne Grand Hotel ballroom. And somehow she looked at me. Not the waiter. Me. Before I explain why, settle in for a minute. Maybe grab something to drink. Because this story took 16 months, $1 billion real estate empire, and a midnight announcement that destroyed an entire family legacy. My name is Vanessa Vale. I was 36 years old the night my stepfather announced that his son would inherit Vale Meridian Properties. The applause started before he even finished speaking. That was the strange part. Nobody questioned it. Not the investors. Not the board. Not the politicians drinking $1,000 champagne near the stage. Because Cameron Vale looked exactly like what people expected a successor to look like. Perfect suit. Perfect smile. Perfect confidence. Meanwhile, I was the one actually running the company. Permits. Litigation. Payroll. Compliance. Financial recovery. Every crisis landed in my office first. But none of that photographed well. And Richard Vale loved things that photographed well. Especially Cameron. That night, my husband Elias squeezed my hand beneath the table. "You saw the seating chart?" I nodded. My chair had been moved again. Farther from the stage. Away from family. That wasn't accidental. Nothing Richard did was accidental. Then the ballroom lights dimmed. Richard stepped onto the stage with a champagne glass in his hand. Cameron stood beside him already smiling. Like he knew exactly what was coming. What none of them knew was that my phone was already unlocked inside my purse. Waiting. People think wealthy families are loud. They're not. Real wealth is quiet. Soft voices. Polite cruelty. Smiles sharp enough to cut glass. Richard Vale married my mother when I was 14. By then, he already owned luxury towers across Florida and Chicago. By the time I finished business school, the company was worth nearly $1 billion. I joined Vale Meridian at 27 during a legal crisis nobody else could fix. 3 weeks later, I saved the company $19 million in litigation losses. Richard shook my hand afterward and said, "You're useful under pressure." Useful. That was the closest thing to praise I ever received from him. Cameron joined 4 years later. Executive title. Corner office. Company Aston Martin. No accountability. Just image. My mother adored image. People invest emotionally first, she used to say. Cameron photographs well. The first time Richard publicly hinted at succession happened 16 months before the New Year's Eve party. Luxury rooftop fundraiser. Miami skyline. Champagne everywhere. Richard lifted a glass and announced, "One day, this company will belong to the son who understands vision." Everyone clapped. I didn't. Because a week earlier, I had reviewed Cameron's acquisition numbers. 3 redevelopment projects had suddenly become wildly profitable overnight. Too profitable. Numbers like that don't happen naturally. I requested supporting files. Accounting hesitated. Then quietly informed me Cameron wanted those records kept internal. That word stayed with me. Internal. Hidden behind calm voices and expensive suits. That night, Elias drove us home through the rain while I stared out the window. "You've been quiet," he said. "I'm thinking." "About Cameron?" "No." I looked at the city lights sliding across the glass. "I'm thinking about numbers that don't behave naturally." And that night, alone in my office after midnight, I discovered 3 separate redevelopment projects tied to the same hidden holding company. That was the first crack. Not the worst one. Just the first one I could prove. The company was called Holloway Urban Ventures. Elegant name. Almost no records. Exactly the kind of entity designed not to attract attention. According to Cameron's reports, Holloway brokered multiple luxury acquisitions for Vale Meridian. Total value? Over $80 million. And somehow, every deal included inflated consulting fees routed through Cameron's division. The money moved carefully. Never directly. Consulting retainers. Acquisition adjustments. Subcontractor reimbursements. Everything kept below reporting thresholds. Whoever designed it understood financial compliance. At home, Elias helped me review the files across our dining table after midnight. Purchase agreements, wire transfers, vendor approvals. Finally, he stopped at one page. These signatures. Cameron's. Again. Across every suspicious authorization. Elias leaned back slowly. Vanessa, this doesn't look accidental. I know. Then quieter. If this is fraud, it's organized. The next morning, my mother called before 8 a.m. Richard says you seemed distant last night. Not concerned. Observant. Like I was a problem to manage. Then softly. You know how important this succession transition is for the family. There it was. Pressure disguised as concern. I agreed with her calmly. That's the thing about long games. You don't start by fighting. You start by letting people underestimate how patient you are. 3 days later, I found another name tied to the payments. Adrian Pike. A consultant supposedly paid millions through Cameron's division. Except Adrian Pike did not exist. No licensing records. No tax filings. Nothing. And yet Vale Meridian had transferred millions to him. Then I noticed something worse. Every payment carried 2 approvals. Cameron's. And Richard Vale's. That changed everything. Because fraud is one thing. But a father helping his son hide it? That turns a family problem into something far more dangerous. And for the first time in my life, I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like a witness. I didn't expose them immediately. Real revenge takes paperwork. For the next several months, I lived 2 lives. During the day, I attended meetings beside Cameron. Approved projects. Smiled for investors. At night, I built a private case file. Every shell company. Every hidden transfer. Every inflated redevelopment contract. Stored offline. Encrypted. Carefully organized. Elias helped quietly. One night he finally asked, "How far does this go?" I knew what he meant. Cameron? Or Richard too? I'm afraid to find out, I admitted. By spring, Cameron became more reckless. Interrupting executives. Calling future projects my company direction. Richard never corrected him. Actually, he looked proud. One afternoon during an investor presentation, Cameron cut me off mid-sentence. Vanessa worries too much about operational details. Polite laughter around the room. Richard smiled beside him. Afterward, a board member named Janice Hollowell stopped me privately. "Watch the Phoenix acquisition," she whispered. "The numbers don't reconcile." Phoenix Tower was Cameron's biggest redevelopment project. Luxury waterfront property. Huge media attention. Richard called it the future of Vale Meridian. That night, I reviewed the internal files. 3 hours later, I found hidden liabilities buried beneath subcontractor debt structures. If the deal collapsed, the company would absorb everything. Unless someone exposed it first. Suddenly, the entire succession made sense. Cameron wasn't building success. He was inflating it long enough for Richard to crown him publicly. At 1 a.m., my phone rang. "Cameron, you still working?" he asked casually. "Yes." Then he laughed softly. "Richard's making the official announcement this winter." I stayed quiet. Big event. Press. Investors. The whole thing. Then finally, "You think you earned this?" A pause. "I earned being chosen," he answered. That was the difference between us. I believed work created value. Cameron believed inheritance did. That same night, I opened the federal whistleblower portal for the first time. The first federal report took nearly 3 hours to submit. Shell companies. Debt concealment. Fraudulent redevelopment valuations. Executive approvals. 47 supporting documents attached. When the confirmation screen appeared, I felt strangely calm. Over the next 6 months, the investigation expanded quietly while life inside Vale Meridian continued like theater on a sinking ship. Richard accelerated the succession timeline. Cameron began introducing himself as future CEO. The media loved him. That was the infuriating part. Confident men are easy to mistake for competent ones. Then came a private investor dinner in September. Richard stood to make a toast. "The future belongs to people willing to take risks." Everyone raised glasses. Then he added, "Not everyone is meant to lead. Some people are meant to maintain." The room went quiet. because everyone knew he meant me. Elias touched my knee beneath the table once. Studying. 3 weeks later, federal investigators contacted my attorney. They needed one final thing. Proof Richard knowingly concealed financial exposure during succession planning. Not suspicion. Proof. That realization sat with me for days. Then one rainy Thursday evening, I entered Richard's office alone. The cabinet key was exactly where it had always been. Inside a black folder labeled Phoenix Internal. I opened it carefully. Printed emails. Private debt summaries. Then, Cameron. Once transition happens, the liabilities become operational issues. Richard. Then make sure the transition happens before exposure. I stopped breathing for a second. Not denial. Not ignorance. Strategy. Richard knew everything. Worse. He was timing the succession before the fraud surfaced publicly. I photographed every page, returned everything carefully, locked the cabinet, and walked out carrying enough evidence to destroy my own family. The New Year's Eve invitation arrived 2 weeks later. Heavy cream cardstock. Gold trim. Private ballroom at the Vale Imperial Hotel. Black tie required. Midnight announcement. I held the invitation in my kitchen while Elias cooked dinner behind me. You already know what the announcement is, he said. Yes. And you're still going? I looked down at the card. Yes. Because Richard loved public celebrations. Which meant the collapse needed witnesses too. 3 days before the event, my attorney called. The agency is ready once the supplemental submission is filed. Timing mattered. If the evidence entered federal records before the public succession became official, Richard would lose more than the company. He'd lose the narrative. I spent the next 2 days assembling the final file. 62 pages. Financial layering. Hidden liabilities. Executive communications. Everything connected cleanly. At 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve, Elias adjusted his cufflinks and asked softly, "You can still walk away." "No," I said. "I walked away years ago." The ballroom looked exactly how Richard imagined success. Crystal chandeliers. Live orchestra. Gold lighting. Champagne towers. Cameron moved through the crowd shaking hands like a politician already campaigning for power. Nobody noticed me arrive. That was normal. Invisible daughters become dangerous eventually. At 11:41 p.m., my attorney texted. "Portal active. Ready when you are." I locked my phone again. And waited. Because after 16 months, all that remained was timing. At 11:58 p.m., the orchestra stopped playing. The room straightened immediately when Richard stepped onto the stage. Champagne glass in hand. Of course. He spoke about legacy. Growth. Family. Then finally, "Tonight, I'm proud to announce the next CEO of Vale Meridian Properties." He looked directly at Cameron. "My son." Applause exploded across the ballroom. Cameron stepped forward smiling while cameras flashed. Then Richard added, "The one who earned it." There it was. The line he'd rehearsed for years. The countdown started somewhere near the stage. 10, 9, 8. I opened my clutch. 7. Unlocked my phone. 6. Opened the federal portal. 5. The completed submission waited on screen. Approve and submit. 4. Elias leaned close beside me. "You're certain?" I looked toward the stage. Then softly, "I've never been more certain." 3, 2, 1. Midnight. Fireworks exploded above the bay outside. The ballroom erupted in cheers. And I pressed submit. Submission received. Timestamp. 12 o'clock and 4 seconds a.m. 4 seconds into the new year. The federal government officially possessed everything. I slipped my phone back into my purse calmly, then took a sip of champagne. For 9 minutes, nothing happened. Then Richard's attorney received the alert. I saw the exact moment his face changed. He moved quickly toward Richard, whispered something. Richard's smile vanished instantly. Then he looked across the ballroom and found me, because guilt recognizes certainty immediately. At 12:19, Richard stopped the orchestra himself. The room fell silent again. "I need to make an additional announcement." His voice sounded older suddenly. The executive transition process will be suspended pending regulatory review. Complete silence. Cameron stared at him. What? Nobody answered. And for the first time all night, Richard looked afraid. The ballroom emptied within 30 minutes. Wealthy people are experts at disappearing before scandal becomes public. Cameron shouted somewhere down the hallway. My mother cried near the elevators. The orchestra packed silently. No encore. No celebration. Just cables being unplugged while a family empire collapsed in designer clothing. I was collecting my coat when Richard approached me alone. It was you. Not a question. Yes. A long silence. Then, how long? 16 months. He nodded slowly. I was protecting the company. No, I said quietly. You were protecting Cameron. That landed harder. Because it was true. Truth hurts most when spoken calmly. Richard looked exhausted suddenly. I underestimated you. I almost smiled. No. You ignored me. Behind him, Cameron appeared furious. You destroyed everything. I turned toward him. No. You did. For a second, I thought he might scream. Instead, he looked at Richard. And Richard looked away. That destroyed him more than anything else could have. 3 weeks later, federal investigators froze the Phoenix Project. Richard stepped down from leadership. Cameron resigned before formal charges surfaced publicly. The board asked me to step in as interim CEO. I accepted under one condition. Full financial transparency. No family protections. By spring, the company stabilized. Debt restructured. Payroll protected. Projects cleaned up correctly. For the first time in years. The numbers stopped lying. One evening, Elias found me standing on our balcony overlooking the water. You okay? I thought about it honestly. Yes. Not triumphant. Not happy. Peaceful. There's a difference. Because real revenge isn't loud. It's precise. A timestamp. A federal submission. A single button pressed 4 seconds into a new year. Richard Vail spent his entire life believing legacy belonged to the loudest son in the room. But buildings don't survive because of speeches. They survive because someone notices the cracks before the foundation collapses. And sometimes, the most dangerous person in a powerful family is the daughter they stopped seeing years ago.